The idea that fat people don't know we're fat, like it has not occurred to us.
Wow, I am dumb and fat. I never thought of that.
So I'm gonna be real, growing up in the 80s, you pretty much never saw fat people on TV.
I mean, sure, every so often you were gonna see a fat kid eating cupcakes and being really funny, and definitely in the 90s we got Chris Farley flying through set pieces, which was hilarious and heroic. Mostly film and television involved incredibly thin women often audibly worrying about getting fat, and the men who loved them, presumably because they were thin. Hell, I wouldn't even know that a fat person could find love if it wasn't for Miss Piggy. I mean, that Muppet saved my life. Without her, I might have never had the confidence to find my own Kermie and start my own acting career. Oh, which reminds me, for my next role, I'll be putting on a skinny suit to play a best friend who just can't seem to find love. Time to set the record straight with Aubrey Gordon. Aubrey Gordon, you are an incredible fat activist. I feel like you are a perfect person to speak to about fatness, fat phobia, and how it intersects with Hollywood. I, grew up predominantly in the 80s, 90s, never saw anyone like me. There were fat men around, but like fat women were just kind of a cautionary tale or something. How did you experience fatness as a young person viewing media?
I had sort of the classic experience of growing up believing that I was unthinkably fat. And then you go back and look at pictures of yourself and you're like, is that really what everyone's perception was here? Like, okay, right?
You're like just a normal kid. Everyone's like, Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. That's what you are.
My recollection of growing up was, like you said, like a lot of fat men and particularly fat white men, John Candy and Chris Farley and all those guys, general extreme silliness.
Yes.
Right? Was sort of like the vibe that they were allowed to have. I feel like for fat women, it was sort of this constant state of expectation that everyone in the audience would identify with a thin woman.
Yeah.
And that folks would identify with rejecting a fat person, right? Like fat people were bullies. They were sort of centered as people who were unintelligent. They were sort of plot devices, right? That we just show up and be like, I think you should dump him, and then disappear again. You're like, okay, I guess that's all we got.
For me as a black woman, basically Eddie Murphy, Martin Lawrence, and Tyler Perry made millions in putting on a suit and sort of sending up, black matrons. There's the misogynoir of that, but then the same thing was done in like Shallow Hal, which like we all were just like, really? And I didn't understand it because it's like, oh, I could never date someone who is fat. It's like, you're fat, Jack Black.
Totally. But like, there is this whole sort of thing in movies like Shallow Hal and movies like Norbit, in a lot of those fatsuit movies, which is like the idea that fat people don't know we're fat seems to be like a real undercurrent, right? Like Jack Black being like, whatever, I'm gonna hit on all these like thin, conventionally attractive women, and I don't have any sense of like my own body. I'm like, no. Somebody with Jack Black's like build and shape and size and all of those sorts of things gets reminders about his body. I mean, it feels like people just think that fat people genuinely, like it has not occurred to us that like,
wow, I am dumb and fat. I never thought of that. So I kind of want to go way, way back. I am definitely going to have to invoke the name of Hattie McDaniel. She was the first black woman to win an Oscar. She played the quintessential mammy in Gone with the Wind, and she played like a mammy or a maid like almost 100 times in her career. Like, I think there were people at the time who were like, you shouldn't be taking those roles. And it's like, are there any other ones? I'm gonna go ahead and get my black ass paid.
So less than 100 years later, we get Octavia Spencer for The Help, right? So like, we can talk all day about how far we've come, quote unquote, right? In some ways, yes, absolutely, lots of progress. And in other ways, like, we're still doing the same thing, team. We're still doing the same thing. I also think, like, listen, I don't know, without Hattie McDaniel, without that kind of, like mammy caricature that we see like time and time again of black women and particularly fat black women, I don't actually think we get the trope of the fat best friend, right? Like, I don't actually think we get, like, it feels like there are some like deep historic roots to seeing fat people in the way that at that time white folks saw black people, which is like for servitude, right? That there is some like expectation of like service from a fat person. Like, you're here to help me. Woo!
You're absolutely right that without Mammy, you don't get the sassy best friend. Now, no matter what the race, it's still related to that Mammy character. A character that we know from film history, which is Ricky Lake's character in Hairspray, which was probably one of the first sort of joyous depictions of a fat person that I'd ever seen. Like, it was such a relief to see Tracy shake her ass, you know, and watch herself and be like, yep. How did you encounter that film when you saw it?
I loved it so much. I remember being so in love with just like how like irrepressibly confident Tracy is. Like the fact that she gets the guy, right? That she gets her love interest. The fact that she and her mom are both fat, and the fact that it all comes wrapped in this like very John Waters kind of like grotesque kind of package.
I guess the original fat icon that I forget that I grew up with was Miss Piggy, right? And the thing about Miss Piggy is she was the ingenue. She was the romantic lead of that show. I'm only realizing in retrospect how important she was. I think it was the first time that I thought that I could be loved by someone else, even if he was a stretched out frog. Like, it speaks to how desperate fat young people can be when there's nothing. It's just like, maybe one day I'll grow up and meet a really nice frog.
I love Miss Piggy. I love that Miss Piggy is a straight lady who's a top.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that is some real underrepresented territory. I genuinely love that she is a pig, right? Again, leaning into like, no, she's fat. She's gonna be a pig. She's gonna be the things that we call fat people. What?
Yeah.
I think we also have to get better at talking about people who are attracted to fat people in a non-fetishizing way, right? Yeah. That like people can have a type and that type can be fat people as long as they're not weird and gross about it. The one person who has like repeatedly carried off like love interest lead roles who is incredible is Queen Latifah.
Yes.
Super cool. She's been super desirable. She has shot romances and rom-coms and all manner of you know what I mean? Like, she has just sort of been able to do all kinds of things, and it's amazing and the best.
I think Queen Latifah needs to get a lot of credit. I mean, I never thought that I would see someone who vaguely resembled me, and like, thank you for doing that because it means somebody else can.
Totally, absolutely.
Aubrey, I would love to know what you think about Shrill, about Aidy Bryant, and just like it being the seminal kind of fat portrayal in a way. What are your thoughts on the show and its role in society?
It's really thrilling to see a fat person, right, in a lead role, right? It's really, really exciting to see a story that incorporates fatness, but that doesn't reduce its character to only being a fat person in a fat body, right?
Yeah.
It feels really exciting that it's touching on a lot of shared experiences that fat women in particular have, right? Like, every fat woman that I know who dates men has the experience of a dude who wants to keep her secret, right? Many, many fat people that I know have the experience of going to a fat pool party for the first time, as sort of memorialized in that scene written by Samantha Irby for Shrill that is like wonderful.
Every fat person has to take on the pool. You know, like, it's just a chapter in fatness is the pool. You know, and it's like, it's a body of water. Jeez.
Often a publicly available body of water that's, technically supposed to be for everybody and is still at the same time such a weirdly exclusive place. I'm so thrilled about Shrill. It feels overdue to have a show that's like about a fat person on sort of on their own terms.
All of these straight-sized people were like, is that what it's like? And it's like, we've been telling you.
Totally. All you had to do was listen.
Yes. Do you have a sense of the direction we're moving? Like, I'm happy that I live in an era where this stuff is coming into being, and that, like, I always feel like when I was growing up, I was the only fat kid. And now that I'm like in my early 40s, it was like, oh, everybody else got fat around me. I didn't lose the weight. Everybody else just got fat. And they're like, how do I do this? And I'm like, come on over here. Let me show you. Come on down to Fat Town.
You're like, get on my level.
Exactly, like I'll lead the way. But like, you know, we now have, I mean, I don't want to be super grateful about the little bits, but it's kind of like something like Shrill is really important. Do you see any promise for the future of this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it feels like there's like this bifurcation happening a little bit where like on the one hand, we've got more movies like Melissa McCarthy's body of work, like Queen Latifah, right? Like fat people who are sort of centered in their own stories.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we have this world of like reality TV shows, My 600-Pound Life, and that are sort of like just like very unabashed freak shows of fatness, right?
Yeah.
So it feels like there is this really sharp sort of branching off.
Aubrey Gordon, I am sad that I have to stop talking to you now because I could do this for a year and not be done.
Such a treat. I'm such a fan of yours.
Oh my God, are you serious? I think you're so cool. Okay, we're gonna take this off camera.
Thank you so much for having me. This is fantastic.
Thank you so much.
If you want to watch more of these videos, subscribe to my channel.